There's Tristan.
Hey there.
Good morning.
Good morning. We were
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Zach Hawkins, Director of Indian Ed for All at OPI. I've been asked to co-facilitate the Chapter 58 review and recommendations. I see we got a few folks jumping on here. I'm going to just wait a couple more minutes to see if there's some other people going to join us. In the meantime, anybody that wants to share anything exciting about their weekend, feel free to do so. My weekend was not super exciting. We're doing a basement remodel and I was hanging insulation most of the time. So.
Zach, can you see who's joined the webinar? Because I accepted the invite through my calendar and the link that took me to was just to be a viewer of the webinar. Then I went back to Tristan's email to get to be a panelist. So we may have some people who should be panelists that are attending the webinar.
Thank you, Esty. Yeah, I've been keeping track of all of the attendees as well.
Yeah, so I show, let's see. I show 5 folks from the feedback group. Oh, maybe 6 now. So maybe we'll give it one more minute and then we'll go ahead and start. Okay, I see we have a few more folks join us. All right, well, good morning, everybody. As I mentioned, Zach Hawkins with OPI. I will let Jacqueline and Tristan introduce themselves, and then maybe we'll do a roll call of the folks that are here.
okay. I'm Jacqueline Raphael. I work at an organization called Education Northwest in Portland, Oregon. And we also have the Regional Comprehensive Center, Region 17, contract, which allows us to work in concert with OPI to support initiatives like this. So Zach and I have been co-facilitating the task force meetings. It's a pleasure to have you all here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tristan Belknap. I'm with the Office of Public Instruction. I am the Deputy Superintendent's Executive Assistant, and I am taking minutes, making your summaries, and doing all of that assistant stuff for you guys.
And if you could share your name and affiliation, that would be awesome. The task force is curious about who's attending and what your roles are as well. So Esty, if you could start, I'll call on people for ease.
I'm Esty Aiken at the University of Montana Western.
Great, thank you. Adria.
I'm Adria Lawrence. I'm the Dean of the College of Education at the University of Montana in Missoula.
Thank you. Erin.
Erin Lipkin, Missoula County Superintendent of Schools.
Wonderful. Emily.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Silly, and I'm from the Department of Counseling, as well as Montana Safe Schools Center at the University of Montana.
Okay, Megan.
Megan Chilson, I'm with the University of Montana Western.
All right. Sarah.
Sarah Pennington, I'm at MSU Bozeman.
All righty. And who else? Tricia.
Good morning, I'm Tricia Seifert, and I'm also at Montana State University Bozeman campus.
All righty. Have I missed anybody who's here?
Did you get Megan?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Esty, did you introduce yourself? Yes, okay. Okay, thank you, everybody.
All right, so for today's agenda, we're just kind of going to go over sort of where we're at, the recommendations that have been made, and then sort of the next steps before October, which is coming up quickly. And, really, I think what we're going to ask of this group today is to really share your thoughts about possible areas where Chapter 58 could be better aligned or should be better aligned with CAPE. But just a quick recap, this is our actual task force. These are the members. So again, we have, EPPs are pretty well represented. We also have some administrators, some trustees. We do have some Native representation with Jonathan J. Eagleman from up in Box Elder, and then Jennifer Smith, who's the chairperson of Macy. So this is the group that has been, reviewing the ARM and working with us to bring forth the recommendations so far. Any questions or comments? Okay, so this is a recap from for those that were here on July 26th. This is sort of where we were at that point, but since I thought, and Jacqueline thought, that we might have some folks that maybe weren't on that meeting, that we would sort of just recap really quickly. So that at that point, we did change some things, recommendations to change, some things in 1058-501. Change Part A to include developmentally appropriate instruction and evidence-based best practices. Change Parts B and L to include native languages. Also to add a subchapter to include ESL, and add a subchapter to include Indigenous language endorsement. So that's for those that may not have been here at the last meeting, those were the sort of the big recommendations that were made at that point. Are there any questions or comments on those? Okay. So where we're at as of today, the recommendations that have been made is some language in 1058-501G to include to better incorporate social emotional learning. Recommendation to add an endorsement in American Sign Language. And then in 1058-312D, recommendation of some language to state that pre-service teachers can receive payment. And just a little bit of history on that. The task force was exploring the idea of recommending that the state explore or do a pilot in the area of sort of a paid year-long internship. A lot of the conversation has been around a feeling that right now that candidates aren't getting enough time in the classroom. They're not getting necessarily a diverse array of experiences prior to stepping into a classroom as a certified professional. And so that idea was batted around at this point. That is not going to be moving forward, I don't believe. But that was part of the idea behind that language change in 1058-312. And I know that's something that has been discussed, and people have different viewpoints on, just based on different conversations that I've been a part of. Any questions or comments on any of these?
So just to be clear, that recommendation is not moving forward to authorize pre-service teachers to receive payment, because needing more time in the field and being paid to student teach are two very different things. So when you say you don't think it's moving forward, is that something that we are to discuss or not?
So to clarify, the language change recommendation in 312, that recommendation has been voted on, that the language would be changed to state that pre-service teachers can receive payment.
I was just going to add it, to the extent permitted by law. I think that's specifically in there, just in case the bells are going off for people. Yeah.
But the recommendation to explore a year-long paid internship program will not be moving forward. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and I also think it's hard for us to just, and maybe you will see the language, it's hard for us to have a conversation around language when we're not seeing the language, I think.
Sure. We could probably pull that up if you would like. Would that be helpful? Okay. Do you have that, Jacqueline, or would you like me to do that?
I think I have I don't have the specific language in front of me, so if you can do it, that would be better. I have the other one, the
Give me just
full
1
tracker.
second here. Let's see. Okay.
Do you have it, Zach, or do you need, I've got it pulled up if you want me to share my screen.
That would be great if you don't mind.
Yeah. All right, can everyone see it?
Can you zoom in a little bit, Tristan?
So Jacqueline, since you mentioned this, can you speak to, I'm a little concerned because we are modifying law. ARM is law. So I don't understand how you pay someone to the extent.
I think that I may have, what does it say there?
To the extent allowed by law, I think is what it's supposed to say.
Right. So the concern was that there are some restrictions on how interns might be able to be paid that have to do with school district rules or other kinds of rules. I think there's some concern that I don't think it's possible for them to get a salary, but they can get a stipend. So I think the thought here was this will open the door for colleges to arrange partnerships where there could be stipends.
And
So it would be left to local control. I mean, if you're saying individual school districts, I have some major concerns. I don't know what else is on the agenda, but like, I want to cease and desist right now and just talk about this, because this is a major shift. And if we move to local control within school districts, we partner with hundreds of school districts. It's going to become incredibly competitive if some school districts are paying. It defeats the purpose of our students paying for credits. There's a big difference between an internship and paid student teaching. I just have some real significant concerns. We don't see minutes from the other group. I know we could be attending, but my schedule just doesn't allow. What's the conversation? Where are they thinking that this is going to build recruitment? I'm just
SD, I'll just, couple things, on our website, you can go back and review, if you go to the chapter 58, you can go back and view all the recordings if that's of interest to you. I mean, this is kind of interesting, and I think, you raised some good concerns. I think this was really supposed to be sort of a piggyback with the internship. And I think the concern was that if someone's going to do an internship and they're a college student, can they financially do that, right, without any pay? And so as that vision was kind of moving forward and we got to this was the recommendation. I think it was not necessarily, the intent was not to say that student teachers in a traditional student teaching experience can get paid, but if they did this internship, if they move forward with that recommendation, that this would kind of be a partner recommendation that would sort of enable that. I was not at the last two meetings because I was traveling and doing professional development. Jacqueline was there, but my understanding is
Didn't get discussed. Yeah, it wasn't discussed. It had already been passed.
yeah, this had already been passed, but the actual internship recommendation I don't think that's moving forward. So this is still sitting out there. So I don't know, that's probably not necessarily helpful, but that's what I know. I think Tricia has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Could someone please help? I was not able to meet this last meeting, and so I'm unclear as to what is the internship and how does that differ from student teaching? And then I just want to also follow up with what Esty was saying about the concern around possibilities of local control. You can envision a student saying, I just can't financially take a position in a place that doesn't pay when my friend has a position in a place that does pay. And I mean, placements are already exceedingly difficult to obtain. And to think that we would not have even baseline equity within a placement, one paying and the other not, stipend or otherwise, will make this an absolute challenge beyond belief.
And to the extent that there's an internship, I understand that we're not pursuing a year-long internship, but I also understand that in law, there's nothing written that says student teaching or an internship is only one semester. So we already have the purview to consider a year-long placement. And having gone through a very similar placement more than 20 years ago, like this is not new. I student taught for a semester, my degree posted, and then I was a paid intern. So I think we already have the prerogative to pay for someone to be in a less than salaried capacity. But I have serious concern. Then what is student teaching? If you're allowed to be paid for student teaching, you're allowed to be paid for an internship. To Tricia's point, this is going to be a holy nightmare. So if this language is moving forward, based on a recommendation and just looking over the committee again, it looks like there were maybe a quarter of the committee is actually in teacher prep, trying to get these placements and trying to get our students to complete in the way that they need to complete. So I don't know, can that be feedback to the group? Like, did y'all consider the impacts that this might have on teacher prep? Because they will be vast. And that's where we maybe need to, the fact that this is like the first we're seeing it, that's interesting too, if it wasn't discussed at like recent meetings. And I know we don't meet as frequently as the advisory panel, so it may have just been a time lapse issue. But I think that speaking now on behalf of Mount Acadie, we would have some serious concerns, having just met with that group, that I think we would bring forward language or I don't know. I'm kind of at a standstill because this is a major shift.
Yeah, so just so you know, we will, every time we do these meetings, that feedback is presented at the next meeting, which will be this Thursday. And this particular one, I believe, did occur after the last time the feedback group convened. We did not deliberately not mention this last time, just to be clear.
And it has come up in the group that there's already, as you said, ST, the ability to have longer internships for student teachers, including pay. So we can revisit this and talk about it. And it sounds like to the extent allowed by law is concerning, because it seems to open up the possibility of differences and variation. Okay.
And I know that the last time, one of the things that was mentioned was that, the majority of the placements go to A and AA and not the smaller schools. And so obviously, I think the scenario that you guys are describing would probably exacerbate that. So that's just a general observation on my part, but.
Well, and then I'll just piggyback on that point, Zach. If the placements go to A and AA, and yet where the need is the greatest for teachers is in B and C schools, we're almost effectively removing them from the greatest chance that they will build a relationship with a pre-service teacher candidate and encourage them to apply where the need is the greatest. And to the points that we've discussed previously, we don't have a problem with graduating enough teachers to meet the needs of the workforce. We're challenged to retain those teachers who have completed our programs within the workforce and retain them in the geographic distribution where they're the most needed.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments, thoughts, feedback on this one? Okay. I can go back to my PowerPoint, or I was going to say, Tristan, do you want to show them some of the other language changes in the tracker first? Or would you guys rather we just move forward?
I'd like to see language if we have time.
Okay.
Sure, let me get it pulled up here.
Okay, perfect.
Back while Tristan's pulling that up, oh, it's already happening, but you had mentioned that students feel that they don't have enough time in the field. Do we have data that's echoing that? Is there a data capture saying
that wasn't students that didn't come from students.
Oh, who was that coming from?
So that came from in the research phase, that came out of the focus group, which was educators, administrators, and stakeholders.
And they thought that students didn't have enough field?
That was one of the themes, yes.
Zach, we did have student teacher focus groups as well.
Okay. So here's some of the other changes that in 1058-501A. And then in B and L, this is kind of an interesting one. This is around including understanding of language. And I guess I would just say the intention of this is not necessarily to have all candidates fluent in all tribal languages, but to have an understanding of language and its importance in Native cultures. And then down below, you see that these were actual recommendations for subchapters to be added to chapter 58.
Zach, was there any discussion about how the Indigenous language instruction might take place, or what resources might be available? I know some campuses have some resources, but it is by no means systemic across the state and across EPPs.
Yeah, there was. And I think the vision is that those would be done through partnerships with tribal colleges, and that students would potentially receive that content remotely. So it would come from the specific tribes and tribal colleges, and not necessarily put the onus on the EPPs to hire faculty that were Indigenous language teachers. Anything else on any of those? Oh, Tricia.
I just want to bring up the point that Ann Eubank shared last time, which was just around the timeline to include these as subchapters for endorsements under a really pressed timeline will be challenging given the level of engagement necessary to really connect with stakeholders in order to write the ARM to be the most reflective and accurate to those groups.
I think you bring up a good point.
Yep, that's been brought up by the task force too.
All right, anything else? All right, well, thank you everybody for sharing your thoughts and feedback. I think Tristan, we can go ahead and go back to my next slide. Sorry. I was jumping in and out of screens. And
I just like to add really quickly in thinking about this. I hope that TCUs are included in any discussion about Indigenous languages. I am fully supportive of incorporating language in, but that's a big ask, and there may be some strictures around language, tribal languages. So I hope that TCUs are involved in that, and tribal cultural committees.
okay, thank you for that. Okay. So I think where we would like to spend the bulk of the rest of the time today is talking about sort of where that alignment could be better between chapter 58 and CAPE. And I think Jacqueline, I'll jump in here in a minute. But, I know that was something when at the very outset of this, there was some conversation around, why does Montana need to necessarily be different than CAPE? But where some of those alignment points should be as well. And I think having kind of moved on from, at least for now, from this idea of a paid internship, I think the bulk of the time that's left is going to be spent looking at this, as well as sort of further other things that need to be addressed in particularly in subchapters 3, 5, 6, and 7. So I think this would be a good opportunity for this feedback group to really share their thoughts on that and how we can sort of, as facilitators and things to share with the task force, what you'd like them to know.
Yeah, and I'll just add, this came up most predominantly in our last meeting. Some members of the task force spoke at length about the importance of at least exploring and ultimately voting on whether Chapter 58 can be better aligned with the CAPE standards, including the new standards that are, I think, adopted for 2022, some standards for initial preparation. And I think subchapter 3 is where some of the members suggested there could be some changes. There is some changes in subchapter 5. We haven't actually looked at these yet because we just want to first even get a sense of what are the concerns and pluses and minuses of doing this alignment. There are some SEL language, actually that's already fine. Some endorsement areas that national professional organizations have already developed standards around. And the task force, some members of the task force feel that some subcommittees could develop language that aligns those endorsements better with national professional standards. For example, business education, MBEA, world languages, ACTFL, I think NCTM. There's a few areas where endorsements currently don't feel align as well as they should with these national organization standards. In subchapter 6, there is some CAPE 2022 standards for advanced programs. Some members feel there's need to do some alignment there. And then in subchapter 7 in the 700s, there are some PSEL standards and NASP standards. Again, it's not so much the details. I guess we would love to know how this group feels about moving toward making these adjustments to better align with CAPE.
Yes, we should, I think. I don't know. We just crosswalked. We spent 2 days last week, our division crosswalking the 2022 standards to the 2013 standards. They are better through the lens that we are viewing them. They are more child-centered. If that's what we're working toward for national and generally state accreditation, because state accreditation aligns strongly with CAPE, I don't know why we would make the burden heavier for all of us to have to comply with multiple sets, even when it's just language cleanup. So the 2022 standards stress equity and inclusion. That's not a bad thing. Anywhere that we can find that language crosswalked within the ARM would be advantageous, I think. So I think it's worth, and to Trisha's point, this whole timeline feels very, very rushed. So anytime that we can take more effort in the wordsmithing, more effort in our stakeholder buy-in, because that's the other thing, like if we are going to align this with CAPE, then we need to show that there was a process of stakeholder vetting and investment. Otherwise, it's lost to us when we try to document that for CAPE.
Thank you. And I guess the one question we have is, are there small colleges that would find this alignment problematic? Is there something that maybe that aren't currently accredited by CAPE? And I don't know.
Well, because of the close alignment between the state and CAPE, whether you do CAPE or not, you are complying with a lot of the same outcomes. I think if I'm looking at folks on the call, everybody on the call right now who's associated with an EPP is CAPE accredited, but having very recently spoken with deans, and a bunch of us on this call were at Council of Deans, the 6 other EPPs are following our lead. there, I mean, we walk in such close tandem with all the other EPPs that I don't think that it would make the lift heavier for the small schools. In fact, if nothing else, it's going to make the lift lighter when we're looking at departments of one. You know, when we're looking at Stone Child, that's an incredibly heavy lift to move through the accreditation process. So I don't know why we would want to ask more of state alignment with the arm and an additional state accreditation when it's already such a heavy undertaking. And there again, back to Adria's point about tribal colleges, while we have Macy representation, I don't see tribal college representation on either of our groups. And as those schools are moving toward their own 4-year programs, it seems like they would have a stake in all of what we're discussing, including whether or not Chapter 58 aligns with CAPE.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
I'll just say that I'm in agreement with everything that Esty has just said.
So are there any other thoughts on any of this, that recommendations, things that think need to be explored by the task force?
I would like to see to be able to reflect on the further exploration of possible changes in subchapters 3, 5, 6, and 7. That bullet point, I'd like some more clarity, like what are the areas under consideration for changing and what would that exploration process be?
I think that is sort of looking at, those are the areas of that would potentially line up with CAPE. Is that correct, Jacqueline?
Yes, I believe so. And we haven't yet even crafted draft language to capture the improved alignment, but that obviously is a big lift that we're going to be, you know, we just brought it up, and then we need to come up with a process that gets that moving forward. There are people on the task force, I believe, who would be willing to take a stab at doing that draft language for the committee for the whole task force to look at, and for you all to see as well. So that's our next step, if that's helpful.
I think she was muted, but I think she said thank you.
I did.
Sorry, I should have clarified that when I put these bullets together, but that was the gist of it, Tricia, those are the areas that have kind of been identified where there's kind of that crosswalk. And so how can the language in those subchapters align with what's already in CAPE or in the 2022 CAPE? So, but just as a general sort of, you know, is there other things outside of that, outside of CAPE alignment, that you think would be important for the task force to look at, to talk about in the limited amount of time that we have left? Well, hearing none, this is my contact information. If anybody wants to, you know, talk about this or wants to request, you know, further information about any of this, shoot me an email. I can send you, you know, what we have or where things kind of came from to the best of my ability. But please know that as part of this process, you know, I'm always available. I appreciate everybody being here bright and early on a Monday morning. And, sharing on your thoughts and concerns. I know that there are many, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.